We're talking about accountability here. And you've heard a lot about orphan wells and the billions of dollars of liabilities that exist right now. These are wells that have essentially been abandoned, leaving landowners and Albertans in the lurch. We want to get into this, find out what the report says and ultimately what it means. Are we moving in the right direction? I know a lot of you have a very simple and pointed question that you ask us. Can we trust Alberta's energy regulator? Eric Leonty is the Assistant Auditor General of Alberta.
We look at programs, processes, systems that deliver essential services and regulatory systems, and to see whether those are operating effectively and achieving outcomes. And that's where this work that we'll be talking about around liability management for non-oil sands oil and gas sites comes into play. We receive a lot of sometimes concerns and questions from the public. We take that into account, and just generally environmental scan of the things that are going on within the province. We ultimately report and serve the Legislative Assembly, so that's the entire Assembly, and by extension, we see that as serving all Albertans and the general public, and we hope that they engage with our work, and our goal is to have our work acted upon. So MLAs, stakeholders, and the public engaging with our work are a big part of that as well, that whatever recommendations we make for improvement, that those are acted upon.
How relevant is the orphan well situation in Alberta right now?
Extremely relevant. It's a long-standing issue. I think since 2010, it's a 5% growth rate in inactive sites. And it poses potentially a number of risks, financial risks, public safety, health risks, environmental, and reputational. And I think those are, for those who are following along, understood that those exist, but whether and to what degree they manifest themselves, depends on good processes by the regulator and industry fulfilling their responsibilities. So, and I think it's an issue that's just grown in importance and risk, and obviously a key factor in why we chose to do a fairly broad, in-depth audit in this area. One area in particular is the liability figure itself. There's a number of numbers that have been floating around over the last while. We acknowledge those in our report. 60 billion for total active, inactive. Approximately 10 to 13 billion inactive sites, and this is non-oil sands. And it's, I think, important for the regulator to explain what those numbers mean and what the risk is behind that. You do have a continuum of risk. You have financial operators that have the financial wherewithal to deal with the inactive sites, and on the other end of the continuum, you have sites where there is no backstop and they just remain inactive and potentially a real problem.
Ultimately, the risk here, the biggest risk to the public, aside from the environmental liabilities, is that taxpayers, that citizens will be left on the hook cleaning this up. Through the course of conducting this investigation, did you see anything that would lead you to believe that there would be any other outcome than that?
Well, maybe the best place for me to start is the notion of the polluter pay principle. And I think an important thing to reinforce is ultimately, yes, the AER is responsible for ensuring that directives are being followed and cleanup is taking place as it should. But industry is ultimately the one responsible to and accountable to doing the cleanup work. I mean, that's the requirement of getting a license to produce oil and gas in this province. One of the things we point out in the report is the polluter pay principle being at risk, or at least that the risk of the polluter pay principle being compromised has increased over the years, and that's from a few factors. I mean, one, just the volume of sites that are going into the sort of orphan well association's purview. The legacy sites that have to be dealt with, and just the growing number of inactive sites from active operators. And so just those inherent characteristics increase that risk. The loans that were made to the OWA that are, would be repaid through the levies over time. There's an opportunity cost to those public funds that could be used elsewhere. Yes, the intent obviously is that those are repaid, but that is public money. And so, I think it's important that the systems and the changes that are taking place now mitigate and reduce the risk of the public having to foot the bill for for the cleanup work. I do want to reinforce that, the 60 billion figure and the 30 billion, the 10 to 13 billion, those numbers, it is important that those are put in the context of what the risk is. So, the total cleanup liability for all active and inactive sites is a large number, just because there is a very large industry and a lot of activity in the province. But it's going down that risk continuum where the greater efforts need to take place. So once operators are in a state of financial distress, it's a little late to ask for security when they no longer have the means to provide it. So it's, as an example, reviewing that security mechanism and deciding, well, maybe it's earlier in the life cycle, other approaches to make sure that cleanup happens early and often. Ideally the risk has topped out, that there's a peak, and then we can see those improvements going forward. It's a broad and complex problem, and there's a number of important regulatory systems in place to manage it, and there's a number that do need improvement.
Yeah. Eric, I want to thank you for this. I mean, essentially, it is a broad and complex problem, but it also boils down to something very simple, and that is that it appears to be that Albertans are getting a raw deal from Alberta's biggest industry, and that, in my assessment of this, has been operating in bad faith. And I know that you're not going to go on the record and say that, so let me ask you this. What power does the AG, the Auditor General's office, have to compel reform of the energy regulator?
We can't compel the organizations we audit to make the changes. That being said, we do make recommendations, and one important function in our office is that we conduct follow-up work. We request and should be receiving shortly, in this case, an implementation plan on how they're going to deal with the recommendations we've made. And ultimately, we follow up our recommendations until they're implemented. So that's an important function as far as the accountability. But to your point of compelling or accountability, and I mentioned, we work for and serve the Assembly, and as I said, by extension, all Albertans. So yes, we hope that the readers, the users of our report, play a role in helping that those encouraging AR to implement those recommendations.